I'm MTS, aka Mel the Scientist, and today I'm going to be looking at FBI negotiation techniques you can use every day. My mother put me in debate when I was in high school, so I do have some skill in winning an argument. However, in my FBI level, I don't think I am. So maybe we'll learn. I'll learn something, and see if I can be an even better negotiator than usual. So let's check it out and see if we can gain any skills.
Wouldn't it be great to win any argument? Well, now you can. Certain FBI negotiation techniques can make you successful at talking down confrontation and getting what you want. The surprising thing is that these are strategies you can use in any situation, whether you're trying to get a raise from your boss or attempting to persuade a friend that you're right. These techniques will make all the difference. If these tactics are good enough in hostage situations, they are good enough for your daily life. The first and perhaps most important thing to recognize before using any of these techniques is that you're actually in a negotiation situation. You may think you're having a normal discussion with someone when in reality, you're negotiating for what you want. FBI experts warn the most dangerous negotiations are the ones you don't know you're in. There are some keywords to listen for and then leverage in order to choose which tactic from this video will work best. If you hear words like I want, I need, or will you come out of someone's mouth, that means they're negotiating, and it's time to bring out the big guns. The trick is that once you realize you're in this situation, you need to get into the right mindset. During any negotiation, FBI agents are taught to remain calm, keep a level head no matter what happens, and if you lose control of your emotions during a negotiation, the other person has already won. According to the FBI, you also need to remember that negotiations go both ways. You may not get everything you want, and you may have to concede a bit in order to get some of what you want, or no one will win. Negotiations are different than ultimatums in that there are ways for both sides to get something they want. Even in high-stakes circumstances, there doesn't have to be just one winner. It is once you accept that you're in the negotiation that it's time to adjust the way you think and how you're going to proceed from here on out. You need to ask yourself, what does the other person want and why? Once you're at this stage, take a deep breath and follow the expert advice divulged by FBI agents on how to get what you want out of the negotiation. This first technique might seem pretty obvious. However, the crazy part is that FBI negotiators were told not to do this for a long time. Then everything changed. Negotiators need to keep their emotions in check, but recent research has found that emotions in a negotiation can actually be beneficial to your cause. A good negotiation never ignores the emotions of the person they're talking to, and they certainly don't ignore their own. This should be the case when you're negotiating as well. By leveraging the emotions of the person you're talking to, you can find ways to connect with them, show them empathy, and work toward a solution. But in order to do this, FBI negotiators reiterate that you need to recognize and accept the emotions present and not repress them. It's recommended that whenever you're in a discussion with someone, you always need to watch, listen, and analyze what they're doing and feeling. In this sense, one of the best pieces of advice FBI negotiators give is to keep your mouth shut as much as possible, because the more someone talks, the more likely they'll be to make a mistake or divulge information that you can use later on. But this tactic isn't just for high-pressure situations in the field. You can use it in your own life as well. Oftentimes in relationships, there are decisions that two people disagree over. Rather than letting this disagreement build up into an argument, there might be a way to diffuse the situation and come to a decision using the embracing of emotions FBI negotiators recommend. If you find yourself disagreeing with someone or getting agitated, it's important to recognize that and step back from that negative emotion. The same can be said for the person you're negotiating with. If you notice anger starting to arise in the other party, you'll want to move quickly to one of the next techniques to help redirect the conversation to a more productive path. There are concrete techniques that the FBI uses when trying to make the other person feel like they're being heard. This can allow them to keep tensions down and move the conversation toward the desired outcome. One of the most powerful tools they use to do this is selectively mirroring the words of the opposite party. This strategy is used by FBI negotiators pretty frequently. How it works is that when the person you're negotiating with is done speaking, you repeat the last 1 to 3 words they just said. This is one way to show you're listening to them and their side of the argument. But there's another reason to mirror words. FBI agents have found that mirroring the last few words of the person they're negotiating with allows them to establish rapport with the other person. This is true both if you already know the person or are meeting them for the first time. Mirroring their words causes them to lower their guard slightly and feel safer divulging more information. Not only does the mirroring technique help build a rapport, but it also slows the conversation down. No matter how good you are negotiating, you'll always need time to think. Mirroring does not take a lot of effort and allows you to think while also building trust with the other person. The more they talk, the more you can listen and mirror their words. This will help you navigate the conversation and drive it in the direction you want. The next technique is subtle yet highly effective, according to FBI negotiators. There's a difference between feeling emotional and feeling empathy. The latter is a game changer when in a negotiation situation. It's important to recognize emotions in the person you're negotiating with, but it's even more important that you let them know you understand their emotions. This doesn't necessarily mean you feel exactly what they feel or have felt that way before, but you can share in the emotion. FBI negotiators call this tactical empathy. The best way to do this is by using phrases like, "It sounds like you're afraid of," and "It looks like you're concerned about." Using this type of language tells the other person you're listening and empathizing with them. But this is a two-way street. According to FBI negotiators, it's also important for you to say what the other person might be feeling toward you before they do. For example, instead of waiting to be called selfish during a negotiation, it might be worth identifying that the other person might feel this way toward you. Saying something like, "I know this sounds selfish." As long as you're careful and plan what you communicate to the other party, you won't say anything that they aren't already thinking. The best part about using empathy is that it builds a connection with the person you're negotiating with, which helps build influence. This will allow you to reach a final destination that works in your favor. Expert negotiators say it's imperative to gain the other party's trust within the first 10 seconds after negotiations begin. The best way to do this is by using tactical empathy to show that you understand the other person's challenges. FBI negotiators use tactical empathy to identify key obstacles that the other party wants to overcome. This same technique can be beneficial in any negotiation you find yourself in. By listening and empathizing with the other person, you'll be able to uncover what is actually standing in the way of both parties getting what they want. You can leverage that information to show how what you're asking for can even alleviate some of the stress or challenges the other person is facing. This may provide the opportunity for a mutually beneficial decision to be made. To be clear, FBI negotiators make sure to point out that there is a big difference between empathizing and sympathizing. You don't need to show you agree with the other party. This is especially true in many situations that require an FBI investigator. If you and the other person agree, then there'd be no negotiation. You also don't need to necessarily show compassion for the other person either. If someone's being rude or unreasonable, you don't need to roll over and take it, but you do need to remain calm. Empathizing with the other person and showing them that you understand their side of the argument or what they're feeling is a good way to reduce tension and allow for forward progression. This might be hard to hear, but you're going to make mistakes. Whether it happens during your normal day or during a negotiation, no one's perfect. However, FBI negotiators emphasize that making mistakes is okay and being corrected by the other party is actually what you want because it can cause them to let their guard down. Admitting our mistakes is extremely difficult. We can oftentimes get defensive even when we know we're wrong. This problem can be exacerbated in a negotiation situation unless you use your mistakes to your advantage. In fact, FBI negotiators will often intentionally make minor mistakes, so the other person will point them out, and the negotiator can admit that they were wrong. This tends to put the other party at ease, which allows for a more productive conversation. FBI negotiators explain that the reason making mistakes works in these situations is because the other side can actually feel enjoyment from pointing out your error. This causes them to want to continue talking to you and let their guard down. Being at ease also tends to force people
That's kind of the viewpoint I was thinking of.
to feel like they're collaborating instead of arguing, which means they might be more willing to listen to what you have to say as well. All of these positives come from just admitting a mistake you made. There's also a more sneaky side to this technique. By purposefully mentioning a challenge that the other person is not currently facing, they'll stop arguing to correct you. When this happens, they may also reveal information that you can leverage. In a situation where you plan on intentionally making a mistake, you need to calculate your cost-to-benefit ratio. You don't want to annoy the other person or sound incompetent by making a lot of false assumptions, but if you make a mistake, either by choice or accident, it's almost inevitable that it will help lower the guard of the other person and cause them to open up and divulge more information than they would have initially. It may also be helpful to examine this technique in a real-life situation. If you're asking your boss for a raise and they keep refusing, you might make the intentional mistake of saying, "It's okay that you can't increase my salary by much since the company didn't make as much profit as we expected this year." If you know this information to be false, it could trick your boss into correcting you by saying the company actually exceeded profit expectations. At this point, you can then leverage that information your boss just put on the table in order to explain your role in helping make that profit, and therefore as a justification for getting a raise. FBI negotiators warn that accepting your mistakes is one of the tougher techniques to master. It's not something that comes naturally, as we don't normally like being wrong. And chances are, in a negotiation situation, your mistakes will not be planned, but will happen by accident. Some negotiators even suggest practicing this skill by using deductive reasoning to analyze different situations you're in. Sometimes you'll be right, other times you'll be wrong. When you're wrong, practice accepting that fact, especially when someone corrects you. It'll be hard at first, but with time, you'll be able to easily accept being corrected, which will help in future negotiations. This next
Yeah, it's actually true. It actually happened quite a bit this summer when I was teaching my interns about biotechnology over the past weeks. And sometimes I made a couple mistakes, and I was like, well, hold up, let me correct that mistake. So, and they would be like, wait, I don't think that's it. And I'd be like, oh, okay, hold on. And I would just research it. I would look it up so that I can see if I was right or wrong. And I would look it up and I would be like, oh, okay, it really meant this. They were like, oh, okay. And I was like, I apologize for my mistake. They were like, oh, that's fine. So, it's all a part of a learning process. You have to show them, especially as their mentor, that it's okay to make mistakes. And that makes them more liable to trust in you as their leader or someone that they admire or are trying to learn from. So that happens all the time. And for someone who hates being wrong, that was something that I had to overcome in order to not have to think about saving face all the time, because it's human to make mistakes. So
tactic might sound wrong to you, but according to FBI negotiators, there is one word you actually want to hear. That word is no. How can this be true, you might ask? It all has to do with the word yes being counterproductive. The problem with asking questions or giving ultimatums that someone has to say yes to is that it can push them too hard. This can cause them to close off from the conversation. Regardless of if you're right or not, getting someone to concede to you before the actual end of a negotiation can hurt your chances of winning. This is because people normally feel like there's a catch if they need to say yes to something during the negotiation process. In order to get around this problem, you can try framing questions in a way that no is the answer you want. A good example of this is, instead of asking someone, will you do this, ask, do you have a problem with doing this? The answer you're looking for is different for both questions, but the outcome you want is the same. The person being asked these questions during a negotiation is much more likely to give you the no answer than the yes answer, even if it ends up getting them to do the same thing. Also, allowing the other side to say no gives them a sense of power and control. To them, it feels like they aren't conceding anything because they aren't using an affirmative. FBI negotiators use this tactic by asking, is now a bad time to talk? Obviously, the agent wants the other person to say no so they can continue the conversation. But if they asked, is this a good time to talk? The yes might be much harder for the other person to say. Often, FBI negotiators use this technique to show that the requests they're asking for are not unreasonable. This can also be done in everyday life. If you want someone to clean up after themselves rather than asking, can you please stop making a mess? You can ask, would you mind picking up your things after you're done? They're much more likely to give you the answer you want in the second question because they feel like they still have power in the conversation. FBI negotiators also have another technique they use in conjunction with asking no questions. There is a special tool in their arsenals that can redirect a conversation in a way that tricks the other party into agreeing to the negotiator's terms. There are two simple words that every FBI negotiator loves to hear. That's right. There are a few reasons for this, but the main one is that the words "that's right" are a cue to the negotiator that they're moving in the correct direction. It means they understood what the other party was saying, and now they can use other means to get them to do what they want. But there is another more powerful reason why "that's right" is so important to hear during a negotiation. You should always keep an eye out for those words because it means that the other person feels understood. This is connected to the empathy tactic mentioned before. The more the other person believes that you understand what they're saying or how they feel, the better chances of building some kind of bond or relationship with them. And the crazy part is that when someone says "that's right," it likely means they're starting to let their guard down. This building of trust, no matter how small, is a huge win in any negotiation. One of the easiest ways to get someone to the stage in the discussion where they'll use those magic words is by reaffirming that you hear what they're saying. This can be done through the mirroring technique discussed earlier, but a more powerful way to get them to this point is by summarizing their perspective, saying something like, I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying, and then restating their ideas might be enough. However, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to make mistakes. This summarization stage is a perfect place to find holes in your understanding, apologize for being wrong, and empathize with the other person. This will all gain you more favor and rapport with the other party, while also clarifying anything that you might have missed. Once you're both on the same page, the words "that's right" will likely be spoken. And then you know the negotiation is heading in the right direction. It's important to note that just because you're repeating what someone is saying to show you're listening does not mean you agree with the other person. Saying "I agree with you" can be counterproductive to your side of the argument, and that could prevent you from ending up where you want. By working
That's true.
toward the "that's right" statement, all you're doing is clearing up misconceptions and breaking down barriers. When you reach this point, it's important to remember the exact facts that got you to the "that's right" in the first place. This is because if you need to gain trust back later on, you can bring it up again. For example, you discover that someone is overwhelmed because they have too much on their plate and they make that known to you. Don't be afraid to circle back to that fact when you need to refocus the conversation. If your negotiation tactics go sideways and the other party starts to get disgruntled, remind them that you heard how overwhelmed they were and understand how stressful it can be. This will slow things down and allow the other person to vent some more. As they talk, you'll gain even more insight and be able to steer the conversation in the right direction. And here's a pro tip from the FBI negotiators. If you feel like you haven't empathized with the other party or gotten a "that's right" in a while, you're not laying it on thick enough. During a negotiation, someone really needs to know that you're listening to them and that you understand where they're coming from. If you don't feel like you've done enough to show you're listening to the other party, then you haven't. It's time to reevaluate and make sure you mirror their speech. Tell them that you hear what they're saying and heavily lay on the empathy. Otherwise, you are quickly going to lose any of the ground you already gained. The phrase "that's right" is a good indicator that your negotiation tactics are going in the right direction. FBI negotiators can't stress enough how important it is for the opposite party to feel heard. If you're given the opportunity, it isn't a bad idea to write down key points to come back to if needed. For example, if you're negotiating with someone over the phone, it might be worth jotting down notes on a pad for future reference. A perfect example of this comes from a hostage situation in the Philippines, where an FBI negotiator was brought in as a consultant. The kidnapper was holding a hostage and wanted $10 million to secure her release. The hostage taker maintained that war damages needed to be paid from over 100 years ago. The negotiator in the situation was coached by the FBI agents who told him to write down all of the grievances and repeat them back to the kidnapper. After doing so, the kidnapper stopped asking for the money, as he knew the negotiator had heard him. Eventually, the hostage was released and brought to safety. The power of repeating what the other party is saying while in a negotiation cannot be overstated. It's a key component of every FBI negotiator's arsenal. They don't agree to the terms or demands, but they do listen to what the other party has to say and make sure they know they've been heard. A more obvious negotiation tactic that you oftentimes see in the movies is when a negotiator allows the other party to believe they have control in a situation. The great part is that if you use the techniques discussed in this video, you can actually create this illusion. According to FBI negotiators, you should never try to force the opposite party to admit they were wrong and that you are right. In any type of negotiation, this will never get you anywhere. However, there is one trick that can allow you to tire out the other party and give you the upper hand. By causing mental fatigue in whoever you're negotiating with, you'll provide yourself with more opportunities to maneuver the conversation in the direction you want. You can tire out the other party by asking them how or what questions. Then all you have to do is sit back and listen to their response. The more the other person talks, the more patient you are during a negotiation, the more likely you'll find an opportunity to gain an advantage. The harder you make the other person work in the negotiation by letting them speak more frequently, the more you'll learn about them and their situation. This will allow you to leverage their emotions later on, which brings us to this next technique you can use in your life when negotiating with someone. As you listen to the other person, take note of the different emotions that arise. If you can find something that triggers a positive emotion, hold on to it. FBI negotiators are always on the lookout for ways to magnify positive emotions to help put the other party in a positive frame of mind. This can make them more comfortable and relaxed, making them easier to reason with. It also is important to remember that in every negotiation, even those in everyday life, both sides have strong convictions. As much as you want the negotiation to come out in your favor, the other party wants that exact same thing for themselves. It should also be said that all the tactics mentioned in this video can also be used against you. Therefore, you always need to be aware of what the other person is doing to make sure you don't get fooled by the same tricks you're implementing to win a negotiation. And this brings us to another important point, something that is much easier said than done. Regardless of the situation and how you feel, you must do this. FBI negotiators deal with the worst of the worst, and even though their job is difficult and the people they deal with have made very bad choices, the negotiator needs to remain calm and keep a semblance of respect. If the opposite party feels disrespected, they could do something rash, which might have terrible consequences in the situations that the FBI deals with. Even in your own life, when you have to negotiate with bosses, friends, or even family members, you need to remember to stay as respectful as possible. This doesn't mean you have to agree with the other party or even like them, but keeping the conversation progressing forward and moving toward a solution will never happen if either party feels like the other does not respect them. FBI negotiators know that if you show respect, you will receive respect in return. This is still true even if you don't like the person you're negotiating with. The main way you can ensure that you're showing respect is by genuinely listening and hearing what the other side has to say. It's when you actually listen that you can implement all of the techniques FBI agents use in their negotiations. Respect is even more important in your day-to-day life, because chances are you'll need to talk to whoever you're negotiating with again at some point. If your discussion was respectful and the other party felt you empathized with them and heard them out, it will help build a relationship that will benefit you in the future.
For a 20-minute video, that actually wasn't that bad. Yeah, they made pretty good points. I'm not gonna lie, it would have been really cool new information if I didn't grow up watching Law and Order my entire life. I mean, I just kept thinking about how I saw that in pretty much all the crime shows I would watch, especially Law and Order. But yeah, I think the most important thing, the only way you can even win in an argument or be the victor in a negotiation is to listen. You have to pay attention to what that other person is saying. You can't just look at them and have have the information go in one ear and come out the other, because you'll have no information to go on. You won't be able to win the argument because you weren't listening and paying attention and taking down mental or physical notes to be able to verbally combat with. So yeah, it was pretty on point with that. Yeah, I think I'm actually pretty good with my technique. Um, I think my personal technique is very good. I usually am really good at argumentation. Well, not argumentation, but I do tend to kind of get what I want, and I'm really good at finessing in a good way, not a bad way. Um, so, yep, that was FBI negotiation techniques that you can use every day. I hope you had a good time watching, and I will see you in the next video. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Peace out.